Hey guys, welcome to another great episode of Tommy Lee Raw. I am here with the Tom Stephen, who was in the Jeff Healey Band and now author of Best Seat in the House, My Life in the Jeff Healey Band. Tom, thank you again for doing this interview.
Cool, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for being here. First question is, what inspired you to make this fantastic book?
I get three things. Firstly, the story of Jeff Healey. For those who don't know him, he was probably one of the greatest guitarists that ever lived. He was also visually impaired, and the third and most important thing was he was starting to be lost to history, and that worried me because our story was being narrated and defined by others who really weren't there while the story was going on. So I decided, it's time to really tell the story as I knew it. Myself and Jeff were the founding members of the band, and that was pretty much what was my inspiration. That being said, it took 5 years to write it, to find a co-writer, which in this case is a guy called Keith Greenberg, who had already written a couple bestsellers. One being a book on John Dean, another being a book on John Lennon. And he's also, Keith is one of the top documentary producers for NBC New York. So this was a guy that really knew his subject, and he was really into doing the topic. But the most important thing in this kind of an endeavor is the trust. And Jeff and my band are sacred to me. So I had to know that the folks I was working with understood the story, weren't going to exploit or take advantage of the story. And so we spent the first 2 years just drinking, hanging out in pubs and just getting to know each other and the subject matter. And then once we got over that hurdle, then we went off and we wrote the book. So the inspiration was to tell the story while I'm still alive, to tell it and to make sure that, to the best of my knowledge, this is how I remember it. But the most important thing, last and foremost, is Jeff Healey was starting to be lost to history. And as we were all proud Canadians, Jeff was the greatest guitarist to ever come out of Canada. He was recognized as such by the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Bob Dylan. I mean, everyone paid tribute. We played with most of those guys, Stevie Ray. And imagine hanging out with the Drakes of our time. We were playing at that level. And that was an important guy not to forget.
Reading the book, incredible excerpt was the excerpt where you guys were going to meet Bob Dylan, and then it didn't arise. But yeah, if you can elaborate to the viewers about that in the excerpt.
Sure. To those who may or may not know, I know this is a younger audience, but Bob Dylan is probably considered one of the great songwriters of the 20th century. And also he was a big part of the anti-war movement and the Vietnam movement. And he had written some songs like Jimi Hendrix had covered, like All Around the Watchtower, that kind of thing, which we used to jam on quite a bit. We were playing a little club called Clinton's here in Toronto. And unbeknownst to us, Bob Dylan's in the crowd. His stocking hat and a pair of big girl sunglasses. No one knows it's Bob Dylan. And when I was leaving, the girl with him approached me and said, Mr. Dylan would like to meet Jeff Healey. And I kind of laughed, like, yeah, sure, Bob Dylan, right? Yeah, that's him in the stupid looking hat and the dumb sunglasses. And as it turned out, it was Bob Dylan. So I went, I believe the dressing room in the day was upstairs, a little place called Clinton's. And he said, Jeff, Bob would like to meet Bob Dylan. And same thing, yeah, sure. I go, no, he's really up there. He'd like you to come up and meet me. And Jeff was like, well, let him come. He can come up and meet me. We're playing his songs. That's tribute enough. And I couldn't believe it, but it was a Mexican standoff, literally. And in the end, Bob Dylan left, and we didn't meet him.
And you know what? There was another excerpt in the book where it states that agents were coming to Jeff and saying, no, you can, we can get you a better drummer, we can get you a better bassist. But Jeff was adamant and said, no, it's just us three, and that's it. So he really stuck by yourself and Joe. What did that mean to you guys at that time, that he was so loyal? He just wanted you to along with him?
Well, I mean, even now you almost get a tear in your eye because Jeff could have had anything he wanted at that point. And so it's touching his loyalty to us. But you got to look at it as well that when I met Jeff, no one cared about Jeff. he'd been, don't get me wrong, he had some great friends. In fact, one of the great things I like about some of the people who were not fans of mine, who've reached out to me since the book's come out, they've read it, they're very close with Jeff, weren't big supporters, or didn't really have a lot of time for me for various reasons. But I was really touched that they took the time to read the book, reach out to me and tell me they really enjoyed the book, that they felt that it was a good rendering of who Jeff was as a person and artist and the band. But more importantly, I learned things about Jeff that I hadn't really even realized, even though I spent 18 years with the guy. And part of that being that Jeff was really not a guy who cared about celebrity. He wasn't a guy, I mean, he was in the movie Roadhouse, which to this day is still played every 2 weeks or 3 weeks all around North America. But he wasn't a guy that walked around and went, I'm in a movie, or I'm a great guitar player. His essence was the music. And we would go and play a festival in Europe, maybe to 100,000 people. And that night you'd find us in some little dump in the middle of wherever we were in Europe, jamming with the local jammers. He didn't care whether it was Eric Clapton. If we were hanging out with the locals and they were kicking butt and it sounded great, we were there. And Jeff was there. And he loved that kind of thing. I mean, that's what he lived for. But his true heart, and I really found that out after writing the book, though I did know it to a certain extent, he loved big band jazz, and he wanted to really be a trumpet player. And after our band, he became a trumpet player in a big band jazz band. So I mean, he got to live that dream as well.
So much again doing this interview.
My pleasure, and let's get the word out there about Jeff. And the mission is Rock and Roll Hall of Fame.
Absolutely. So yes, guys. So this is Tom Stephen here, author of this amazing book, Best Seat in the House: My Life in Jeff Healey Band. Like you should purchase on Amazon, Barnes and Noble,
and indigo.ca.
Indigo.ca.
And chapters. Right.
Book, guys, and you gotta definitely get this. Thank you so much again. It's Tom Stephen.
Thanks so much.
And Tommy Lee signing off.